And we're in the home of John Brookens on First Street in Westmoreland, Kansas. He was born January the 13th, 1917. So how old are you now, John?
86.
86 years old. I'm Dean Schoengert, and I will be the interviewer, and I'm coordinator for the Oral History Project in Potawatomi County.
Kansas.
Yes, in Kansas. We want to get that in there. Tell us how you got into the service, John.
Well, okay. I am blind in my right eye. I went down to take my draft physical, and of course they sent me back home. My father was attorney for the draft board of Potawatomi County, and one day
Keep going.
a young girl that I was just out of law school, by the way, and I was dating a young girl here in Westmoreland, and you want her name?
What law school?
Kansas University. And I was dating this young lady, and she said to me one day, "John, do you know what they're saying about you?" And I said, "No, what do you mean?" And she says, "They're saying that you're a damn draft dodger." I said, "Well, why are they saying that?" "Well, one of the men that was with you when you took your physical said that anybody could read that eye chart. You said you couldn't see it with your right eye." I said, "Well, that's true, I can't. I still can't." And I said, "Well," so I went to talk to my dad about it, and I felt pretty bad because my friends at that time were going into the service from Westmoreland, and I didn't think I was a draft dodger. In fact, I knew I was not. And my father says, "Well, John, do you want to go to the Army, do you? Is that it?" And I says, "Yes, I do." So he arranged for the office in Topeka that was in charge of sending out the calls for people to send out a call for one limited service. I was listed as limited service. So they sent out a call for limited service, and I was familiar with the secretary, whose name was Gertrude Brill. She was the secretary of the draft board, and I went and told her, "When that comes in, let me know, please." So she called me up one day and says, "John, it's here. You better get down here." So I went down and volunteered that very day. I found out later there was a young man from Wamego in the same boat I was in, and he was wanting to volunteer too, but I beat him to it. Anyway, I went into the Army then as limited service. I went to take basic training at Fort Lee, Virginia, which is a quartermaster place, and they were training me to be a company clerk. They were training me, the Army was training me to be a company clerk. Well, one day the company commander, his name was Hyman Amber, or Amber Hyman, one or the other. He called me in and he says, "Brookens, are you a lawyer?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Are you practice law?" I says, "Well, I did a little bit, not very long, because I didn't have much time. I was just out of law school." And he says, "Well, I have a call here for lawyers to volunteer for the Counterintelligence Corps." And I says, "Well, okay." He says, "Do you want to volunteer for that?" I said, "Well, what do they do?" He says, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, I don't know either." He said, "Well, think it over and come back tomorrow and tell me." So I got to thinking, I don't want to be a company clerk, and I don't know what the devil the Counterintelligence Corps does, or did, but it sounds better. So I went and told the captain I would volunteer for that. And I did. And I signed up for the Counterintelligence Corps. They sent me to Atlanta, Georgia, put me in civilian clothes, And I was there for, I think, as I remember, I think 2 months training. And then they sent me to Memphis, Tennessee with 2 other counterintelligence corps people. And then I was there in the, I think it was 4th Army headquarters. I was working out. I was doing security clearance work for people in the Army and military that had access to secret information. I was conducting background information on these people. And then after about, that went on for 3 or 4 months.
Did you do that? Did you have a staff to help you with that?
Yes. Yes, I had transportation, and I had an office, so to speak. I was in civilian clothes, and my rank was corporal in the Army at that time. I got a promotion from private to corporal, $66 a month.
Mm.
Well, I was single, and I didn't have any expenses. And I then was sent to Baltimore, Maryland.
Did you ever have to turn down anyone for
No.
as a security risk?
No, I used to go up into the mountains of Tennessee, and I was talking to. I can tell you a few stories about some of these people. I would go up and say I'd find out where this young man, this man was from, and I said, "You know Joe Doe?" "Oh yeah, knowed him all my life." I says, "Well, is he what kind of a fella is he? Is he honorable? Is he honest and reliable?" "Oh yeah, yeah." "Is he clean cut? Clean as a hound's tooth," they'd say. And I would go back and write up a report. And I always used to say, I'd always used to put that in the written report. He's clean as a hound's tooth. He takes only 1 diluted martini a week. And I did that work for about 3 months, if I remember right. And then I was sent to Baltimore, Maryland for further training. And then I was sent to I can't think of on up to upstate New York at Watertown, New York, which was on the Canadian border. Joined the 5th Armored Division. And I was the first counterintelligence corps man there, CIC. I didn't know what the devil I was supposed to do. And after a while, a 2nd lieutenant showed up. He was supposed to be my commanding officer. Well, he didn't know what we were supposed to do either. And then finally they gave us instructions what we were supposed to set up a counter-espionage network. We were supposed to arrange for people to report to us of any strange happenings. And then I was up there. I don't remember. Not too late. That's not Camp Lee. That's. I can't think of the name of the military installation where I was up at Watertown, New York. I can't think of it. I'll think of it after a while. I don't remember so good sometimes. Anyway, I was up there, and then pretty soon we got an overseas. I was in the 5th Armored Division. They issued us winter clothing. It was getting cold up there. And the next thing you know, they gave us an overseas alert, and with the 5th Armored Division, and we were given a overseas furlough. I called up my girlfriend that I had been dating back in Washington. She had a job in Washington, D.C. I asked her to marry me, and she said she would. And I went home for overseas. I stayed home 3 days. Made my mother and father very upset that I didn't stay longer. I told them I was going to get married. They said, well, who in the world are you marrying? Well, they didn't know who this girl was, and they thought that was a panic wedding. A lot of soldiers got married just before they're going overseas. We used to call them panic weddings. Well, it wasn't, because we stayed married for 47 years till she died. Anyway, I went back on a train to New York City. We were married in New York City at the church, the little church around the corner, it's called. It's a Protestant Episcopal church. We were married there. And we had a honeymoon for 2 days. Then I went back up to camp. They sent us down to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. A whole division went down there, and I went down there, and another guy showed up in this CIC, Counterintelligence Corps. We call it the CIC. Frank Cambry, he was a PFC, and I was a corporal. He was a secretary, so to speak. He could take shorthand, and he was a good typist, and he would write up my reports. And I still, by the way, Frank and I became close friends, and I still write. He lives in Clearfield, Pennsylvania. He's still alive and lives there, and we write each other each Christmas. Well, we went overseas. This lieutenant was Higgins, I think his name was. He's the second lieutenant. He was kind of an oddball. I think he was scared to death. He acted like it all the time. Anyway, we got.
What was the crossing like? What was the crossing like? Was it a rough crossing? Or?
Well, we were on a troop ship, English troop ship, and we ate a lot of oatmeal. And I got seasick a lot, pretty easy. I get motion sickness. I used to get motion sickness in a car, sometimes going up over hills. And in airplanes, I'd get motion sickness. Anyway, I was sick half the way over there.
You have any submarine scares?
No, we were in the convoy. And they would take us up on deck in the morning and then again in the afternoon for exercise. We would do calisthenics. It was cold. It was in February, if I remember right. This would have been about February of '43. And we would exercise, and as far as you could see in every direction, you see American ships. And right ahead of us was a big battleship. So we felt pretty safe. We didn't ever have any trouble all the way across. We were in a big convoy. And we landed Liverpool, England. And then we went to Swindon, England. And we stayed there, this was in February. We stayed there until just before D-Day. And while we were there, some more CIC people showed up. Vic Barton was one of them. I don't remember the names of these, about 5 of us. And then we went down to Plymouth, getting ready for D-Day. And we didn't go over on D-Day, thank God. But we went over D-Day plus about 10, I think, something like that. I always thought we landed at Omaha Beach, but I later, when I came home, I got to looking at the map and some of the towns, and I found out that we landed on Utah, not Omaha. I didn't know that at the time. Of course, in the Army, you never knew where you were unless you're a commanding officer. He's supposed to know where you were, and he told you where to go anyway. So we went into combat in Europe, and I did some things then, and England furnished us with intelligence reports. We didn't never know where we were going. We were given strip maps of where we were supposed to go ahead of us, and you didn't know where you were except on that little narrow strip map. And they would give us intelligence targets where we were supposed to go and pick up enemy people and don't kill them, just capture them and bring them back. bring them back, and I don't know what happened to them. We'd send them back to the rear. And I was promoted then to sergeant, and then I got another promotion to staff sergeant, and then I got promoted to tech sergeant. Then we went through Paris. We we went in Paris one end of it, and the Germans went out the other end of it. And we went through Paris and on up into Belgium. We went through Sedan and France. It rained and rained and rained, and our tanks bogged down. We couldn't move. Oh, Lord, everybody got the GIs. That's diarrhea, by the way. We couldn't keep our mess kits clean, and you eat with dirty mess kits, you're going to get sick. And that's what most of us did, including me. We ran out of toilet paper. We were in hell of a shape. And
cold too, was that?
Pretty cold, yes. Yeah, well, we were wet. And then we went to Metz, went through Metz, and then we went into Luxembourg. Now this is going to be different than you imagine. We went into our division, liberated Luxembourg City. And I had some targets in Luxembourg City that I was supposed to secure. I was with CCR. An armored division has 3 combat commands. Combat Command A, B, and R. I was with CCR all the way through. From the time we landed in Europe, I was with CCR. Colonel Anderson was he commanded CCR. That's, I would say it's equivalent in an infantry division to a regiment. And I had targets in Luxembourg City that I was to secure. And Vic Barton by that time, was my assistant, and he was my driver. I was a tech sergeant at that time. Colonel McFarland was G2 of 5th Armored Division, and he called me into division headquarters, and he says, Brookens, I've got a young man here, and I wanted you to take care of him. He was a Luxembourg civilian. Rene Schiltz, S-C-H-I-L-T-Z. Rene Schiltz was his name. He was a Luxembourg citizen. He was 18 years old. He, along with other young Luxembourgers, had been picked up by the Germans and made German soldiers. Bang, you're in the army. He was sent to the Russian front. He didn't want to. He hated the Germans with a passion. He went AWOL and made his way on foot clear back to Luxembourg City, and he lived in a church steeple, and the nuns took care of him in a Catholic church, and he lived up in that steeple for 13 months waiting for the Americans to get there. And when we got there, he came down out of that steeple, and he was pale. He was weak. And Colonel McFarland said he wanted to go with us. He wanted to fight the Germans. Now this is different than you would imagine what happened, and I didn't know what the hell to do with him. But I said, well, all right. And I put him in an American uniform. He was, and we were living in the field, by the way, sleeping out on the ground, and he like froze to death for a while. He was pretty soft. He spoke English, French, German, Italian, anything there was. He's a real bright young man. He's told me he could speak classical Greek even. I don't know if he could or not, but that's what he said. He spoke English with a British accent. I took care of him. I put him in my Jeep, and Vic Barton was our driver, and I put him in the back seat. Vic didn't like him. I think he's jealous of him for some reason, because I was kind of taking care of Rene. I took a shine to him. He was a tough little devil. He was very useful in language. He could speak any language there was. And once in a while we'd pick up a straggler, and he would find out who he was, and once in a while you'd have woman. It was a man dressed as a woman trying to get away, and he would find that out and he'd laugh. Anyway, we went from Luxembourg City. We went on through. We went through the river into Germany, and CCR was the first Allied military force to enter Germany. And I was with them. We were there about 4 or 5 days, and we got the hell kicked out of there real bad. We had severe casualties. We had very severe casualties. I remember we were eating breakfast one time around a little campfire, and we were being shelled. And the Germans' artillery was coming up over our heads. They were firing at the tanks up on the hill behind us. It sounded like you'd just take a cloth and rip it. It was a pretty frightening sound. And all of a sudden, Steve Mindcheck was our interpreter, started hitting the ground, and he says, I'm hit, shell fragment cut his jacket in the back, and he was sent back to England. And it didn't kill him, but it wounded him, and he had to go back to England. Well, we got kicked out of Germany after about 5 days. We went back over the river. I think it was the Moselle River, if I remember right. I think it's the Moselle River. And then we went back up north into Belgium. We went up the Hurtgen Forest, the division did, the CCR did. They run out of infantry up there, and they held that forest. There's no place to put an armored division because you can't maneuver. But we were up there, and we had bad casualties there too. It was cold. There's snow on the ground. Well, then we came back down out of there, and they put us R&R for a while. And there was a young man from Westmoreland, Kansas that I ran into that was with CCR also. He was a rifleman. I think it was 47th Armored Infantry Battalion of the 5th Armored Division. He was in Company A, if I remember right. And he was wounded. And I used to get supplies for that guy and warm clothes and take them up to him because we didn't have enough warm clothes at that time. And I went up looking for him one day, and nobody ever heard of him. I come to find out what happened was there was a German 88 piece of artillery up on this hill ahead, and there was a machine gun that's off a ways protecting that gun. And this young man's name was Maskell. Peck Maskell was Arnold was his name. His nickname was Peck. I don't know where he got that name. But his squad was ordered to take out that machine gun. His squad was going through an open clearing, and that gun opened up on him, and Peck dove, and it just happened, he hit a low spot in the ground, and his feet stuck up, and he's clipped in the heels. The machine gun clipped him in the heels. Now, I learned this later by talking to him. He was sent back to England as wounded. He later returned to the division, though. Anyway, then we went over the Rhine River. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot to tell you. While we were in Germany, going through Luxembourg into Germany, that's where I got my battlefield commission. They ran out of lieutenants. A first lieutenant is a dangerous, a second lieutenant is a very exposed fella in the army, in combat, because he's the guy that has to kick these soldiers out of the foxholes, and get up here and follow me. And the casualty rate on those guys is very high. And I was given a commission as a second lieutenant. I could read and write pretty good. And so then we went on into Germany over the Rhine River. And we...
What kind of bridge? How did you get across the river?
On big pontoon boats.
Pontoon bridge?
Pontoon boats, yeah. The tanks, you had to space them out. Don't get too close together. You sink the damn things. So I would always like to get right behind a armored car or a tank followed in my Jeep. I was in the Jeep all the time. I can still see that river. We got over the river, and on the other side of the river was a town, I think it's called Wesel, W-E-S-E-L, W-E-S-S-E-L, Wesel. And there wasn't a thing standing in that town. Everything had been flattened by bombardments except the church. For some reason, that church was not hurt. And we went through there, and the Air Force had put paratroopers over ahead of us. And they had glider troops. And that was a terrible thing to be in a glider, for God's sakes, because you couldn't control it after they cut them loose. And they come down, they hit a tree, and they had terrible casualties. It was not a very good idea. I wouldn't want to be in one of those gliders. Anyway, we went through Germany, and we ended up on the Elbe River, 90 miles from Berlin. And we were getting ready to cross the river, and they brought up 155 millimeter guns behind us. They were shooting over on the other side of the river. You could hear the shells going over. We were supposed to go over there next day, and we ordered to pull back. So we didn't cross the river. We just stayed there, and pretty soon, after about a week, the Russian army showed up on the other side of the river. These were Mongolian soldiers. They were small men, dirty. Looked like they'd cut your throat in a minute. And some of us went across the river to talk to those guys. And they had occupation money. The Germans, the Russians had given them occupation money the same as we had occupation money at that time. That was a terrible mistake, because we found out that Russia was flooding our troops with their money, and we had to pay for it, see? So they finally withdrew all of our money and reissued new script. It didn't compare with the Russian script. Anyway, we got a lot of wristwatches from those guys. They had wristwatches. Where in the devil they got them, I don't know. We bought them cheap and sent them home. And then we just waited there until the war was over on the west side of the Elbe River. And pretty soon the war was over. And we were getting ready to get back home. We thought we would end up in the Pacific. They still had a war going on in the Pacific. Well, we went back to Le Havre, France. And we heard they dropped the atomic bomb. And that ended the thing right there. We said, well, we don't have to go over there. And I remember one time on the Rhine River, we were, one day it was a clear day, and we heard an airplane coming. Didn't hear it, we saw it. A German fighter plane was coming from north to south. It didn't make any noise. And after it went by, it was a jet. First jet I ever saw. We didn't know what the devil it was. It didn't have a propeller. It didn't have an engine like we're used to hearing. And it was just a swoosh. And we found out later it was a jet fighter that the Germans had perfected. Well, we didn't have any jets at that time. Well, anyway, I got home. Christmas Day. My wife, folks lived in Topeka, Kansas. And when the war was over, she quit her job in Washington, went back to Topeka. And I would write her letters about twice a week. And I don't know how long it took for her to get them, but she knew I was okay. And she knew I was coming home. I stayed in Paris for about a week before they had space for me on a ship to come home. The British intelligence had very detailed information about the cities that we were going through, and the political targets, Nazi political officers in every town that we went through. We had a dossier on who was there and what their title was and their home address. We were an armored division, and that moves pretty fast, you know. And we would get there sometimes before they could get away. And we would head for those. We would go in with the forward troops, and we would go to this address. We picked up block lighters, and we found a Christ lighter one time. And we would put a gun on them and Hand hoch and all that, you know, hands up. And Mama would cry and think she thought we were going to kill them. Well, we didn't kill them. We would pick them up and take them and send them back. What they did with them back, I don't know. But our job was to get them out of there, pick them up, get them out of there, and send them back behind the lines to higher authorities where they would be questioned. I suppose that's what they did. And this was the basis of a lot of those war crimes trials.
These were town leaders and...
Yeah, the political leaders of the Nazi Party.
Oh, Nazi Party leaders in
yes,
that town.
And it was always... we went through Nordhausen one time. That was the first time I ever saw. I've still got pictures of those dead bodies piled up in the yard of this factory, of little children and women and old men. They were skinny, skin and bones, that they'd starved them, and they'd worked them, and they would kill them and get ready to burn them, but we got there before they had time to do that.
This Nordhausen was a factory?
Nordhausen was a concentration camp.
Concentration camp.
And I remember Colonel Oliver, our commanding general of our division, sent us downtown and rounded up a bunch of civilians, brought them out there and marched them through that pile of dead bodies. And every one of them, oh, ich weiß es nicht, ich weiß es nicht. I didn't know, they would say. Well, I think they did know. They had to know. How could they not know what was happening? How could they not know? But they all, oh, ich weiß es nicht, they would tell you. Oh, they were. And anyway, we would pick up political prisoners of the Nazi Party. In every town that we went through, they had somebody that we were to find. Most of the times we were there quick enough that we could find them. Once in a while, they would be gone already. They would take off before we could get there. Well, and then when we got home, and I got home here Christmas Day with my wife Ethel, and I wrote Rene Schiltz letters every Christmas, and he would write me every Christmas for 50 years. Last Christmas, I wrote him my Christmas letter. It was returned marked deceased. That just broke my heart. I almost cried.
He was in Luxembourg all this time?
Hmm?
He was in Luxembourg all this time?
Mm-hmm. Well, Rene then joined the Luxembourg army. Luxembourg had a little army. It consisted of 1 battalion. I think that's the size of it. And he was sent to Sandhurst, England, which is the British West Point. And he graduated from there and went back to Luxembourg and became a colonel in the Luxembourg army at the time. And he did retire as a colonel. And the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Luxembourg City, he wrote me and wanted me to come over there for that. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Higgins, one of my friends in the CIC, went over, I remember. Higgins lives in California. He was not a close friend of mine, though. He was with CCA of the 5th Armored Division. I was with CCR all the way through. And Frank Cambry was in division headquarters. I don't know what he did there. He kept the records, I guess. And Vic Barton was with me all the way he joined us in England, and he was with me. Bob, I can't think of his last name. He got himself killed the first week of combat. That's the most dangerous time for soldiers, is the first few. You don't know what to do. You don't know what not to do. And if you don't know, you're going to get yourself killed. You learn pretty quick to hit the ditch and stay low and just keep your nose clean. And when you hear noises, damn it, something's wrong. And you hear airplanes ahead of you up above, they're going to strafe you if they can, and you want to hit the ditch. Most German aircraft, they learn quick not to strafe an armored division column, because every vehicle in that division has a machine gun, a 50 caliber machine gun. And so they would strafe you this way instead of longitudinally. They'd go this way. That means they couldn't hit very many people at that time, and you see it coming. And by the time we got to Germany, really there wasn't too many German airplanes left. The American and British Air Force had pretty well knocked them out of the sky. And once in a while, the Americans would bomb our own troops by mistake. Mm-hmm. So they would give us panels to put on top of our vehicles, different colored, orange and yellow, different colors for different days. So they could, from above the airplane, they could look down and see, well, that's an American column. From 5,000 feet up, you can't tell one army from another hardly. And once in a while, we would be in a column and we'd have to stop. And I'd like to. Once in a while, you'd wait, and pretty soon you'd hear we had an air liaison officer with us at all times, and I would like to listen to him talking over the radio, and he'd calling all air, and he would give his map coordinates. And there would be a roadblock up ahead. And pretty soon you'd see maybe 3 or 4 or 5 American fighter airplanes come over. They'd circle a little bit, and then they'd say, I see the target, and they'd come down. And they would dive, and they'd let the bomb loose. After about 2 or 3 of those bombs, they'd say, go ahead, and then we would go on, and you go where they had hit this roadblock, and they knock hell out of the people that was holding us up. Toward the end of the war, where we were, the Germans ran out of military people, and they had what they called the Volkssturm, the People's Army. And they would have young boys with pistols trying to stop a tank. Well, that's suicide, they can't do that. And after the war was over, they would put wire across the road so your Jeep would take your head off if you had your windshield down, and we all have our windshield down, and the back down on the Jeep, because you could shoot in any direction that way. And you learn quick not to do that. And they would have a wire cutter up in front of it. We would put wire cutters in the front of the Jeep, and otherwise that booby trap would kill you. It'd take your damn head off. What it would do. That's pretty. War is a terrible thing. We were on the Rhine River. I remember seeing boots with feet in them yet. Mortar fire, you know, it was just like a scythe. Mortar fire would cut you off at the ankles. And the Americans, infantry, up there, they suffered terrible casualties. And I don't know. I hope we don't. I get to thinking about it. It makes me want to cry even. That's all I got to say. That's enough?
Thank you, Mr. Brookens.
Okay.
Appreciate your time and effort to do
I would
this.
like to say one other thing. War is a terrible, awful, cruel thing to happen. I hope our children don't ever have to do this again, but they probably will. Probably will. Okay.
At least it's been.
I feel it has a terrible stench after a few days. I can tell you about my father wrote me a letter after the war was over. Eugene Hill from Westmoreland was killed 2 days before the war was over. And he wanted me to see if I could find his grave. Well, I was a lieutenant then, and I had a little clout, and I had access to vehicles, and I went and found out where he was buried. And I went up there, and I was AWOL. And I found out where he was buried, and they had a little wooden cross, Eugene Hill, second lieutenant of infantry. That's the most dangerous thing you can be, is a second lieutenant of infantry. And anyway, they were just digging him up and moving those graves at the time. I was there, and oh, the terrible stench. I couldn't hardly stand it. But I took pictures of his cross and sent it home. And when I got home, I went to see his folks. They ran the newspaper here. And I went in there, and his mother and father, they looked at me, and they couldn't talk. And I finally just turned around and left, and I knew what they were thinking. Why did you come home and our son didn't? Huh? He's buried out here. Okay.
Did you have,
What?
after you got home, did you have trouble at night?
I'd wake up at night. Yeah, for quite a while. Ethel, I would wake up choking her sometimes, and I'm afraid I'd hurt her. I didn't have a place to live, so I lived here with my folks. My folks had this house here. We finally got a house of our own. I had saved up $2,000. I didn't have any money. I was paid $75 a month practicing law at that time. I ran for county attorney. Any soldier could get elected to anything right after the war, you know. Did you know Ben Pickering from Omega? Are you a Omega native?
No.
Oh, well, you wouldn't know him then. He was county attorney, and he was a World War I veteran. And when I announced for county attorney, he said, "John, I'm not going to run against you because I can't win anyway." So, because anybody that had a war record could win an election right after the war. You know that. It isn't the way it is now, but that's the way it was then. I was county attorney, and I got $125 a month. And I had a wife, and had 2 children by then. Yeah, and I had a wonderful wife. Come here, I'll show you her picture. I'll show you. My mother wrote and said she's a very nice girl. I said, yeah, I think so.
How long were you county attorney?
Oh, I served 2 terms. Then I was in the legislature 2 terms. And then I came back to practice law. At legislature, I won't buy the groceries. In those days, you get paid $5 a day. Hell, you can't live on that. My father died in 1950. He had a stroke the year I came home, and I was in the office with him just about 5 months is all. And there I was with a very busy law practice, and I couldn't remember. I've been gone 4 years from the law studying, and I spent night after night down at the office studying, trying to remember what to do. And I became a pretty good trial lawyer. And then I got appointed district judge in 19 when? Well, I retired when I was 65, and I was a judge 17 years, so I was 40-something? Yeah. I've had a pretty eventful life. My wife was killed in a car wreck, and you're not taking this, are you? But you had to follow the law. You can't change the law, you know. I became a district judge. That's a trial judge. A district judge in Kansas has jurisdiction to hear any kind of a case there is. And I heard about every kind of a case there is. I heard probably at least 2,000 divorces in 17 years. I don't know what's happening to our marriages in America, but it's pretty bad. About half of the people get married and end up in divorce. They promise a lot of things when they get married. I don't know if they mean it or not.
Did you have murder trials too?
Oh yeah, I've had, yes sir. I've had several murder trials. Overdose. I was a district judge of 4 different counties. I would Jefferson, Jackson, Potawatomi, and Wabansie County. And I would travel from one county to another. Jefferson County is where we had most of the murder cases for some reason. I used to tell them there's something in the water over there. I had some pretty bad murder cases right here in this county. One from Wamega, Downey murder case. You know about that?
I've heard about it.
I was a judge in that case.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, damn it.